Hello YouTube, welcome to the first of three Team England videos. I'm Lucky Sixes, joined as always by Hyper G.
Hello everyone.
And today we're here with some very special guests to look at the ETC and Team England in general. So a bit of an introduction to both of those. We're here with, who else would we be here with other than the England team captain, Tanker.
Hey all, how's it going?
Hello, you alright?
Good.
And, a man of many names, most of which are positive as well, which is good.
I don't know.
But all of which are in different languages, that's for sure. Marcus, hello.
Hello.
You okay?
Yeah, everything's good. Yourself?
Yeah, really good. Thank you very much for joining us, everybody. Basically, today we're just going to look at Team England, basically, and the ETC. So we'll get straight into it with things. And from your guys' point of view, for anybody that's joining in going, okay, this is interesting, but I don't know what the ETC is. What is the ETC, and what does it mean to you guys?
So the ETC stands for the European Team Championships.
I'm so glad someone said that.
Yeah. So originally, I think back in the dawn of creation, it probably was just European teams, but I know that the Aussies have been coming for a long while now, and other teams from outside of Europe have been coming for quite a while now. So it technically probably should be called the World Team Championships, but that's been a bit hijacked by a certain German man. So it's been going, as far as I'm aware, I think it's early 2000s, 2003-ish, rings a bell for the first one.
Which obviously predates 9th Age.
Yeah, I think it was 6th edition was the first Warhammer one, shall we say. A 6th, 7th, 8th edition, and then obviously 9th Age now as we know it. It's had 40k with it for a number of years, but not anymore as an official extra game system. And this year as well, I think will be the first time. Flames of War is still part of the ETC, but I think this will be the first time where Flames of War is held in a different venue. So the Flames of War teams actually voted to hold, I think it was in Poland this year, the Flames of War teams voted for. So it's going to be quite an interesting change of dynamics, really, because obviously the last few there's been 3 or 4 main game systems, and it's been quite a big event. So it's going to be a lot smaller this year in scope. Still going to have a lot of teams. So overall, it's teams of 8 players, and teams can bring a number of coaches and extra people for the team as well. There's always a fair few hangers on here and there. Some teams have 15, 20 players. Some teams have 15, 20 people sometimes.
This year and such.
This year there's 30 teams, which I think's around the highest number there's been. There's been 32 again. So yeah, it's good that there's seems to be a lot of teams interested. So 240 players. Every country pretty much will have at least a coach, maybe more. So you're talking a good 300 people or so that are going to be talking 9th Age a lot, basically.
Awesome.
That must be a massive venue. I mean, I can't even picture a tournament of that size because I've never been anywhere close and never will. But that's insane.
It's moved around. Obviously, it moves each year or two, depending on who wins the vote for the next year's event or the year after's event. It's been held in aircraft hangars in the past, big hotels, sports halls seem to be the big one. So I know Serbia was in a sports hall. This year's a sports hall as well.
We've had one in an Olympic venue as well.
Of course, yeah, the Greece one, yeah.
Oh, sweet.
And in Greece.
So in Greece,
well. Yeah.
I think the Taekwondo.
Oh, awesome. Very cool.
That does definitely ring a bell, actually, Marcus, yeah. It was the Taekwondo venue, wasn't it? Yeah.
Great.
And
you're both pretty experienced, I think is safe to say, in terms of ETC.
Yes, I think this will be my 5th, maybe 6th. I've been to all the 9th Age ones, basically. I don't know, Marcus has been to probably another 4 or 5 on top of that.
Yeah, I get about. But this, I've been to everything except the COVID years since 2012. So this would have been my 10th year, but it's actually my 8th.
Technically. We're not a technicality kind of people. We'll go with 10th. it's a nice round annual thing.
Yeah. It would have been a bigger milestone, but I guess I'll just have to wait a while.
Just have to keep going.
Try and stay at the top of my game.
That's it. And from your both point of view, I guess it's for both of you. Have you both been with England all the time?
So I have, as a player all the years. Marcus has fritted a game between about
I haven't. I get about. So I originally got the chance. I was good friends with a couple of Bulgarian guys that are on the England DTC scene. I happened to knock about, live near them. We played a lot of games and got to know them.
Yeah.
And they were going for their first year at ETC, and coming up to it a couple of months before, somebody dropped out. And I believe not many people from Bulgaria could afford to go. So I stepped in and played. So my first 3 years I went was mercenary for Bulgaria.
Awesome.
Then 4th year I made England, played for England for 2 years. And then I didn't make England and played for Wales for a couple of years. Then obviously COVID happened and there was everything was a little bit squiffy at one point, but now I'm playing for come out of the dust playing for England this year.
Sure. And you sort of mentioned mercenaries there. In terms of ETC, and for people, I guess people that don't know, is there a minimum amount of people that have to come from one country, or can you have a team of mercenaries?
So there has to be 4 players from a country, and then the other 4 can be made up of mercenaries. I think the only rule on mercs is that it can't be 4 mercs from the same country.
Oh, right, okay.
Then you'd have half and half, basically.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think that's the only rule on mercenaries there. There have been a couple of exceptions where teams have only had to have 3 nationals if someone's dropped out at the last minute, that type of thing.
Sure.
In terms of teams of mercenaries, it's not allowed directly. There is often a team UN that's formed if there's an odd number of teams.
Okay.
But this year there's not actually an odd number of teams, so it's even.
Great.
So there's been a lot of people. There's a mercenary chat, for example, in the Discord for ETC where mercs are looking to pick up teams. Mercs are looking for teams to pick them up.
That's cool. Like a merc pool or something like that.
Yeah. Basically, yeah. It typically ends up just being first shouted and then someone just gets selected. But yeah, definitely. There's definitely a lot of teams will pick up. It definitely seems that a lot of teams have picked up more mercs as the years have gone on.
Yeah.
Is there like a situation where like you see a merc become available and you're like, oh, I really want that merc. Sorry, one of my guys is getting cut because they're really good.
So I know in some countries that's done. And, so I don't think they'd ever cut someone directly.
Sure, yeah. I mean that's really harsh, isn't it?
If the team's being made and they've got their 4 nationals, they might then pick other countries. No names being mentioned there though.
Yep, of course.
Oh, I thought you were going to whisper it.
I'll get something out here. Don't worry.
They know who they are.
And I mean, in terms of when you're there, you've got your team. However you sort of comprise it. How are games and the tournament different to a regular? I guess a regular tournament or a teams tournament from here.
So I guess time and amount of games is probably the big change, really. So the games are 4 or 4.5 hours long, depending on whichever gets voted for. This year it's 4 hours per round, and that includes your time for pairings, that type of thing. And then the other one is we only play 2 games a day. So we play 2 games on Friday, 2 Saturday.
Kind of tournament.
Yeah.
But in terms of the 4 hours, that's not all gameplay, is it?
No, so that includes your time for pairings, which there isn't a set amount of time for it, but you're normally looking 20, 30 minutes or so to get that done another way.
Yeah, and in terms of pairings and stuff, like we will go into that in some other videos on different pairing matrices and things like that. So if you're interested in that, wait for the next video because we'll talk about that in length. But from your point of view, do you have you tried many of those pairing matrices or anything like that?
Over the years, there's definitely been a number tried. We've tried a fairly simple one this year, I want to say. It's got 4 bandings, so good to bad, basically, with 2 in a little bit of a good and a little bit of a bad. Yeah, I think it's worked quite well so far. Overall, we did have an open category where it could mean the game was very swingy, but we ditched that a long time ago.
Sure.
Now,
It's too easy for people to go in the middle.
Exactly, yeah.
Never have a scaling of 5. People just sit in the middle.
Yeah.
And in terms of the ETC as a, I guess, spectacle more than tournament, it's run over 3 days, but you guys normally go a little bit longer, is that right?
Yeah, so the ETC itself is ran over 3 days. There is the ESC, which is the European Singles Championship, which is, I believe it's 6 games, but it might only be 5. I think it's 6, though. And that runs on the Wednesday, Thursday before the main event. And some crazy people do play in that and in the ETC, so you've got like 12 games over 5 days or so. But yeah, it's a little bit too many games for me. But yeah, historically, England's since 9th Major started, we go out a few days before the event normally, just to acclimatise, that type of thing. This year we're going out on the Tuesday as a team, basically. There's only one member of the team going out the day later.
Sure.
So yeah, we'll have a good couple of days.
The classic high altitude training, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, everyone's got to get sunburnt on the beach, haven't they?
We'll introduce ourselves to the area and
absolutely.
Marcus will find somewhere that does Sambuca tequila shots. Sorry, and then,
I mean, in that regard, because I know that we will be sort of like touching on it briefly, but in the other videos. But ETC, in terms of, isn't just about the gaming, is it? There is more of a culture around that, and people you speak to quite a lot.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of friendships you spring up over the years with other countries, different people from those countries as well. I speak to a lot of the guys from other countries at the moment. Yeah. Well, every year basically, but especially as you're coming towards ETC, you speak to them more and more as the excitement builds for it, really. But yeah, if it wasn't for the social side, I think it'd be quite miserable if everyone just went and played the games, that type of thing. So yeah, it's definitely the social side which keeps people going back.
Marcus, do you have a bit of a soft spot for Team Bulgaria, because you previously were one, and Wales, I guess?
I've got many soft spots, but yeah, particularly Bulgaria and Wales. And I've got a good couple of friends on Norway, everywhere. I mean, Americans, Australians.
You're just so full of love.
Yeah,
Polish, Germans. Yeah, I can't leave anyone out. You know.
Yeah, sure.
There's always a couple of warnings we give to new players as well before the event. So you never accept a spirit from a Scandinavian because they're always some type of homebrewed 100% death juice, basically.
A lot of people will bring little tokens from their country. So, for example, if you play against Norway, you may well meet Hermanard, who will have quite often a raw deer's heart with him.
Was he the one slicing off meat last year?
Yeah, he will be offended if you won't have a slice of his deer's heart. So,
okay.
Be shunned or eat raw deer heart.
Well, sure. I'm sure that was in Game of Thrones at some point.
Quite often it's all sorts of people with the strongest of liquors to try and get their opponents drunk.
Fair enough. And from obviously do you have any sort of like teams that you meet up with regularly for other things other than gaming?
Not directly as teams. There's definitely people from certain teams where we'll see each other throughout the year if they're coming over or if we're going over. But no, I'd say most of there's sometimes a pre-holiday that's organised where a load of teams will come. Well, certain players from some teams will come, some whole teams will come.
Sure.
But yeah, it's more. I'd say most of it's geared towards the gaming side. There is obviously a few friendships where people see each other outside the game. But most of it's geared toward gaming still.
No, it certainly sounds like good fun, and I've heard a lot of stories about different ETCs for different reasons. So, very good. Often that go into the night as well, which is lovely. But in terms,
I've played a couple of days of ETC without sleeping.
Yeah, and how is Game 5 after that?
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Although we always used to prepare a Denmark warm-up event, and that would that prepares you for anything that can happen at ETC.
Yeah.
That's 4.5 hour rounds in one day.
Wow. Goodness.
That's most of the hours of the day.
Yeah.
Quick maths, right? But really.
Yeah.
So that is your high altitude training sort of jobby then, really, in that regards.
In prior years, definitely.
Yeah. Sure. And in terms of actually, before we move on, is the Ashes? What's the Ashes? Because that's been, obviously we know what it is in cricket, but
yeah. So I think from the very first year the Aussies joined, or maybe the second, we've done the Ashes every game.
And is that at the venue?
Yeah, it's at the venue. It's been on the It's normally on the Thursday afternoon. So the game just before ETC starts, sure. Basically. We'll basically play the Aussies, and then we'll go out for food and drinks afterwards, basically. It's always been the kind of setup for it across the years. It definitely... I think at one point it was actually a rule book burnt down into a little urn that was given out.
Incredible.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was the 6th edition rule book when it went to 7th edition.
Yeah.
The rule book got burnt up and put in an urn.
Insane. It's not someone's army, was it, in the cross in between, was it?
I don't think so.
Fair enough. Is that going ahead this year?
Yeah, we've got it. I think it's 3 o'clock or 2:30 on the Thursday. Nice. Cool. And there's normally one of the coaches will be live tweeting it as well. So,
awesome.
And I think in the past when people haven't been to the ETC, if they used to go in, there's definitely always been a bit of a following of back home people discussing it in chats, that type of thing.
Oh, great. Well, very good luck for that then as well.
Yeah.
But I've taken a slight step back, so that's what the ETC is in general, and obviously you've got the 6 games and over that. With team tournaments as well, how is there... Because sometimes there are caps in different tournaments, and different tournaments are capped at different levels. How does the capping work ETC?
So ETC's capped at 100 points for the winner and 60 points for the loser at an absolute top and bottom. So it doesn't matter if all 8 players were to get 0, you'd still get 60 points for the round. And it's mainly done to stop people running away with it too early if they happen to get a good run of form, or they happen to get a team that isn't taking it quite as seriously as them, that type of thing.
Yeah.
There have been big scores in the past. I think one of the biggest I've ever seen is about 150, 152.
Oh, right,
so
wow.
there have been like big scores in the past.
Sure. And that's done to keep it live for day 3?
Yeah, basically, yeah. There's very few years where you know who's won it until the last game, basically.
Oh,
so
great.
It does normally do a good job at keeping it at least interesting between 2 teams or so.
Sure. And in terms of you guys, obviously you've planned for all this and everything, but going right back to the start of the year, you obviously formed the team. It's your first year of captain?
Yeah.
Previously Amit and then Mikey before that. I mean, how have you found the captaincy role this year?
Yeah, it's been good overall. We have had a fair few dropouts across the year, I think, as people have had time during COVID. They've thought they're going to have similar amounts of time and haven't. And obviously, everyone has dropped out for valid reasons, work, university, that type of thing.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things that real life creeps back up on you. And I know it's definitely I know the people that are still on the team, it's definitely real life obviously taking more and more of their time up now than they thought it would do during COVID.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of, I guess, without really looking into dropouts, what's the sort of time scale for selecting the team and then sort of going on and working with the team?
So it's kind of been a bit of a moving thing across the years. So some years it hasn't really been sorted till, I'd say, October, November time. Some year it's done and dusted by end of September. But normally it's the previous team, the current team, and anyone from the previous year can vote for the captain for the next year, basically. And then it's kind of up to the captain how they form the team from there.
Sure.
Recent years we've been going with a selection committee of 4 to 5 people, and I think that's been working really well overall. We have a good chance to look over all the players that we think might be interested, and then have a look at resumes, that type of thing. When they resume, they're strong. Yeah, their applications.
Gaming applications, yeah. And of course, for people that don't know, that's sort of how you apply to become a Team England player is by putting a sort of semi-formal application in.
Is that what I did wrong? That's why I didn't get considered. Oh, man. I didn't know.
Yeah, next time. Next year.
There's always a decent number of applications, but I don't think we've ever been in a situation where we've had to roll people in to apply, unfortunately. So there's always a good spread to pick from. I think obviously how we do it is a little bit different how some countries do it. Some countries have a tournament a couple of months before the event where any team can enter. Sure. Whichever team wins is the selected team, that type of thing. So I definitely think it's up to.
Would you ever consider doing that, or is that a bit risky in your opinion?
Because
I mean, technically I could win that, and I'm like so far off ETC ever. But technically, I could win a tournament, and then would you have to pick me? Just using me as a poor example, but
yeah, I personally don't think it's a bad way of doing it. I just think if it's going to be that way, it needs to be decided on before the ETC, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Before you even vote for a captain for next year, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I personally don't have any problems with that way. I think the only thing for me in my head is it's a little bit late where some of the teams don't do them till May, June time.
Wow.
Then obviously booking flights and accommodation at that point can be a bit of a hassle. I think if you're going to do it, you'd want to do it earlier personally.
Yeah,
sure. And I guess Marcus has the same sort of question. Has Tanker been a good captain this year?
Yeah, so far. So I mean, I'm one of the people that stepped in when with drops for life over the year so far. But yeah, no, everything's good so far. We're playing a lot more practice games than we used to back in day.
And how is that in terms of practices and because you meet up for team practices and everything? How is that? What they sort of look like, Marcus?
So it'll normally be roughly one per month, and again, quite often one or two people won't be able to make it, but yes, 6, 7, 8 of us will go over to one of the people's houses, move all the sofas to the walls, get 4 tables up, and get some games.
Yeah, sure. And do you find them? Is it just games that you do, or is there any sort of talking and things?
I'm not sure. There's a couple of beaten down factions that will try and talk about tactics, but yeah, we try to keep it light.
Fair enough. So more of a just sort of informal chat more than anything.
Keep the team well bonded, because there's nothing worse than if you've got two people with vastly opposing viewpoints on the same team.
Well, I suppose you've got to go on holiday with them at the end of the year, so
yeah,
that certainly helps, right?
But no, everything's good this year. No complaints.
Good. See, that's the right thing, because he's got to match you up, right?
Yeah, ask him again after the talk.
Yeah.
He's got vermin when we can play anyone. It's fine.
That's it. So in terms of, I guess we've sort of mentioned practice weekends and things. What other things are involved in being part of Team England? So I guess from your point of view as a captain and from a player's perspective.
Yeah, so there's kind of a bit of a log that most of the players fill in, or we have chats about games, etc. from tournaments as well. So that's definitely one that feeds in. I think the big hope I had with practice weekend, which we haven't actually been able to hold out, is to. I think if the team was more settled, I'd like to think we would be closer to it, but we were still practicing a few of the lists quite close to this deadline.
Okay.
Weeks. Ideally, in an ideal world, I think we'd have probably been set on lists a couple of months earlier and had some time to practice some of the crazy lists that we've seen come out. There's definitely been a few lists which have caught us out. And obviously our meta is a little bit different to a lot of the European meta as well, just because we have our little island and a few players come over, but not many. Sure. And we don't really go to that many tournaments, or we haven't this year because of COVID, etc. Yeah, so in prior years, we've normally tried to do 2 or 3 events across the year. This year, we haven't been able to make any other than the online events. Sure.
And I guess that it comes what you said with the COVID has impacted us more than we thought in certain regards. as well as organising those sorts of things and getting people chatting, is there any other roles and responsibilities a captain would do for a team that you may not sort of think of initially?
In the run-up to ETC, I think it's more just admin, really. I think there's definitely a setting the tone for the team, that type of thing, and making sure everyone's on the same page type approach at the start of the year, which I think everyone's pretty locked in now for the team. I think that other than that, I think, as I said, it's more around admin, making sure hotels are booked, making sure flights are booked, just basically making sure everyone's going to get to ETC in one piece. Has been a problem in prior years from certain members of the team, otherwise known as Tom. So,
what was that, Marcus? Sorry.
I was saying, and also a big part of the role is making sure that I've got all of my things.
Well, I mean, being on Vermin Swarms, you're just painting now solidly for a month, right?
I mean, I wish it was only the models, like.
Yeah, Marcus has a lucky duck for each game as well.
Oh, right, okay.
If that duck doesn't make it in one piece, I think he'd go home.
There'll normally be at least 2 days of the weekend that I have to Tank has to find me pants or something.
Fair enough. The ETC culture, folks. So, I mean, for you guys, obviously you've done all the prep, the months was. How much do you use tournaments as like single player tournaments as prep? Because obviously there are team tournaments throughout the year. How useful is a singles tournament for you as a team, I guess, and you as players?
So I basically at the start of the year told everyone to treat them as practice weekends. So
sure.
I wasn't fussed where people finished in the event. If people wanted to try Wacky List out, try them out. It didn't. If they were a bit off meta, didn't really matter. That was kind of the top singles tournament type mantra at the start. And I think overall it's worked quite well. I think it was definitely, from still seeing some of the lists, there's a few teams and armies that we just don't see in the UK that we just haven't had the chance to play. Like the standard high elf build this year is very different to what we see in the UK. We don't see many high elves anyway, but when we do, it's normally the Queen's Guard and Swordmaster variety. And it's just not that big this year. So it's definitely a few things like that which will be interesting to see. Obviously, Sylvan Elves are very popular. ID are very popular. We see a bit in the UK, but not quite as much.
Sure. And from a player's point of view, how much are you thinking about trying stuff out as opposed to winning a singles event, Marcus?
Almost entirely. I mean, there's times when I'll know I can take a strong list to an event, but I will take something different and get a painting hit because I need to test it for ETC. Like, sure. Essentially, especially after you've done a couple of years, and especially this year with going in, you've got the Ashes Pride and everything. Everything coming up to ETC is practice.
Obviously, puts a bit of like pressure on you, I guess, to get those practices in, right?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily, as Tank said, it doesn't often always matter if you win or lose, but yeah, everything's testing, trying. No reason to ever give up.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think the big thing I tried to install at the start of the year as well was playing for points, even in a bad match or that type of thing. Try and squeak 6 points when you think you can only get 5, that type of thing, just every little bit.
Sure. Avoid the dreaded naught.
That's definitely the team mantra.
Yeah.
Fair enough. How much if a player comes to the captain and says, I'd really like to play this army, but they haven't had a good record that year with that army, how much sway has the player got to say, I really want to push that army through? Or can the captain just say, you've played rubbish all year with them? No, you've got to play with this other army that maybe you're better with. Or how does that work?
So I think in terms of forcing players onto other armies, I think that's a conversation to have with each player and just say, it's basically a conversation to say that the results don't look great. We obviously had, not to use Luke as an example for bad play by any means, but we obviously had the Gunline Ogre list that we were quite happy with. Mm-hmm. The book got updated and now you can't have the Leadership 9 Shaman. I think the list has been kind of... I still think it's a strong list, but I think it's far too risky for how you'd want it to play now.
Sure.
So unfortunately we had to move Luke onto Warriors at that point because I don't think personally, I don't think the standard ogre list needs more practice time than warriors to get right. So at that point, we moved him on to warriors, and that was a fairly easy conversation to have. Really, Luke was pretty amenable to moving over as well. All worked out okay. And then obviously, as part of that, we moved Goose onto Vermin Swarm, and I moved on to Dread Elf. So the original plan was I was going to take the Vermin Swarm, but we moved things around a bit.
So even as captain, you're not choosing Saurians, no?
It is pretty much written down in the chart that I can't take them. It is that. Yeah, and after the update, I actually think they're in a good space as well.
All right.
I mean, a lot of stuff in there. So, unfortunately, no, I don't think I'll ever get Saurians. I don't think even in the updates I'll be able to take them.
Fair enough. So, I mean, in terms of Team England, then, what, obviously, it's a slightly, which we will go into in a later video, slightly different makeup of a team. There's quite a few new faces, which is awesome to see. What goals do you have, I guess, for this year as opposed to last year or previous years?
So there's 3 or 4 ones that don't directly involve the ETC or don't involve gaming per se.
Or get on the right plane.
No, definitely getting the Ashes back is one of them.
Right.
Lost it 2 out of the 4 times, I think, in 9th age.
Okay.
And we hadn't lost it previously, so definitely having a good go at getting the Ashes back. And it's an interesting year this year because the Aussie lists are very out there as well.
Is there 4 no magic lists? Is that right?
I think it's 4 no magic lists, yeah. So
amazing.
I think we've got like 1.5 binding scrolls each. It's definitely going to be an interesting games. And there's a lot of Cowboys in their lists as well, which we don't really see in the UK much anymore. So it's going to be an interesting round against those guys. Getting some pride back against the Americans as well is definitely on my list. We had a practice round against them recently and got battered. So we play.
But you were letting them win the practice, right? I mean, obviously.
It's only been the last 3 or 4 years, but we play the Americans in the Tea Party in the first game on Thursday. So we play those first, then we play the Aussies for the Ashes afterwards.
Sure.
Definitely getting a bit of pride back against the Americans is definitely up there as well. I got smashed in my game as well in that one. So, definitely for me, getting some pride back there. I think the third one's around sporting. We've typically done quite well as a team on sporting. I think we got second a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. I think it was the year Craig and Mikey were co-captain. So it's definitely a view to carry on with that and basically make sure we do well on the sports voting. And we never do too badly. We're always in the top third or so there, but definitely to carry that on. And then in terms of the actual weekend itself, I think I've already spoke about the no zeros. That's definitely one that I want people to pick up whatever points they can. Is definitely one of the mantras. In terms of where we finish at the ETC, top third or so is where I've got my aim at.
Sure.
I think top 10, we've had a couple of strong years and we've had a couple of years where we've been in the mid-teens, low teens. So I think top 10 is a good aim realistically for the team, especially with there being quite a few new faces.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Marcus, do you have any? Obviously, those are all the team goals and everything. Do you have any specific goals as a player going into a tournament like this?
Mostly I've had a bit of a checkered past it with regards to the Ashes, so I've got quite a personal aim to make sure I win my game.
Fair play.
Maybe even make sure I get a point in my Ashes game. I mean,
sure.
Oh,
a new hope.
Yeah, I think that's the main ones for me there across the team. Personally, I think there's a few people on the team which I'm interested to see how they handle like their first team tournament properly, because obviously it's Mark, Josh, Luke's. Luke has been actually for other teams before. Saying that, it's Mark and Josh's I think first experience of ETC. So until that first game happens, you don't really understand the scope of it really, with it being that many teams there and that many people there. There's definitely going to be interesting for those guys to hear his. Nothing ever phases Mark though, so I think he's quite chilled out normally.
He's not suddenly going to start shouting at people, no?
Yeah, an angry Mark would be an interesting thing to see. I think. But, and then there's a few things around. Obviously, a couple of the guys are quite slow, and it's just speeding play up and that type
Sure.
of thing. We've been working on it throughout the year, but we've obviously there's a few things we picked up from Scotland as well, the Four Nations, where just simple things like making sure everything's marked down easily, making sure you've got different trays so you can move into different formations really quickly, that type of thing, just to speed up basically.
Yeah.
And obviously having the coaches there will be a big help for that. And Leggy was really good at Scotland in keeping scores for the team, but because there's only one coach across the whole team, it can be a bit tricky to take your timeouts, etc. when you want.
Sure.
So that's
and that's something we'll definitely be going into quite a lot of detail actually in our third video with the coaches. But coaches aside, how important is it that you have like a makeup of, I guess, new blood and experienced players like yourselves?
So in terms of gaming wise, I don't think it's that important how you do it, as long as you think it's the best team that you could field. I definitely think from perspective of the team this year, there definitely was an old boys perspective amongst the team, which I definitely think this year there hasn't been. And I think everyone's been a lot more open and involved with the team this year and chatting with the team, etc.
Sure.
And I think that should continue now, hopefully, for as long as it keeps going, basically.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I guess why do you think that is? Why do you think there's this sort of transition from the old boys club, quote unquote, whatever that means, to what it is now?
I think it's mainly just a mixture of real life for people. I mean, weddings, honeymoons, babies, they've all happened this year basically for everyone at the same time.
Sure.
So there's definitely been a few there. I think, I do think a few of the guys will definitely be back in future years, and obviously there's definitely enough strength in some of the guys to play on the team 100%. So it's going to be interesting reintegrating people back into the team in future years as well.
Yeah, sure. And I guess depending on how well everyone does this year, right, as well.
Mm-hmm.
It could be very, very strong. Do you feel like, as well as personnel, that maybe there's a different shift in perspective or opinions of the team?
Yeah. Overall, I think it's definitely a more open team than it's ever been. So it's definitely a good thing from my point of view. I don't know about you, Koos, if you feel the same. But
yeah, no, I mean, like, obviously, because I was very briefly part of Wales at the beginning of the year, right? Like I'm still friends with all the boys, and again,
Sure.
because I've been to so many ETCs at this point, like I speak to people from about 6 or 7 ETC teams most weeks,
who are all vying for your player, right?
Not for my player vote, but just ETC is everything.
Yeah, man. No, fair play. So one thing that perhaps hasn't been as big this year, but almost from previous years has helped maybe with dropouts and things, is the England Lions. It's not so much this year because so many of the Lions have come into the team, but is that something that you'd be looking to continue in future years?
yes, definitely. I've spoken to a couple of the guys as well. We've only really got 3. There is a Lions chat, but obviously the active players that are still playing that didn't drop out for reasons, there's only 2 or 3 people that didn't make the team.
Sure.
So I think obviously it was a bit decimated this year, unfortunately. The year before COVID, they could field a full team as well.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something to grow next year. Is definitely on the cards.
And I guess as an introduction for anybody, we sort of mentioned this, if anybody doesn't know what the Lions is, as opposed to, do you want to do a brief introduction of what that is? And
yeah,
how
so
that
the
connects?
Lions were started, I think it was 2019, the year before COVID, 2019 by Amit, as a kind of a bit of a proving ground for new blood. If people didn't want to apply straight for the team, but they still wanted to get involved in team tournaments, they could join the Lions. There was also a few players in there that had been on the team previously and were interested to be in the future, but not this year. So it was kind of a mixture of experience and new blood, basically.
Yeah.
And it worked really well because obviously Mark, Josh, Luke have all come from the Lions. I think Hugh was in there partially as well for a little while.
Yeah, and possibly Ali as well, that did get
Ali
into
was,
the team.
and unfortunately had to drop out.
So
and I think Jack was as well at one point as well, before he had to drop as well. So there's
Awesome.
definitely definitely a good amount that have come through, and I think it's definitely, as I say, one that we want to carry on with. I think it was a really good thing for Amit to start.
Yeah.
And just carrying it on next year with hopefully a full team.
Yeah. Well, as you say, really starting it up has proved its worth this year, because all those people have had sort of mini experiences and at least chats with the England team before actually joining. So.
Yeah.
Oh, great. So I guess just to sort of wrap up, because we've sort of talked about most of the things that we want to talk about. If anybody sort of like still got to this point, firstly, well done. And also, if you want to, if they're still thinking about what the England ETC team is and wants to know a bit more about it, how do they go about doing that?
Reach out to any of us, basically. I think myself and Koos, obviously, on this call. I know that Raf and Tom are going to be on other ones from a coaching perspective. Yeah. I think it's Mark and Jake as well are going to be on for the team. Reach out to any one of those. Reach out to, I know Hugh's got a fair few players in his local club now in Canterbury. I think there's a fair few that play there. Reach out to Hugh. Reach out to Josh if you're one of the Liverpool guys, Chesterway, or Mark as well, of course. And then obviously reach out to Koos if you want any spicy tips.
Yeah, I'm about.
Excellent. Well, that's, very good to know. I say thank you so much for coming on and sort of talking to us about ETC and about Team England. Really appreciate your time, especially on a hot day like this, to be inside and everything. So we won't take up too much of your time other than say thanks, and really good luck for the American, the Ashes, and of course the ETC.
Yeah. Cheers, guys.
Is there any last or final words for our first round opponent, Luxembourg?
Not overly. They're great guys, so it'll be a good round, to be honest. It's they've got a few lists which are a little bit off meta as well, it seems. Cool. So it'll be an interesting round.
So looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
So prediction?
Yeah. I'm pretty confident we'll be all right. That's where I'm going.
It's a very cagey answer, probably wise.
I like it. That's a
Marcus, you reckon it's 100-point guaranteed?
I think they can probably say por favor.
Good point, actually.
I would think so. Yeah.
No, right. Well, as I say, thanks very much for joining us. Thanks as well, Hyper G, coming in on this.
I'm learning a lot and I'm bound to learn more from more of these videos. It's really enlightening, and I really appreciate you guys spending the time with us and telling everyone about ETC and about England. It's really appreciated, especially as potentially, you guys are so busy at this time of year getting everything else ready. Even to spend a little time with us is massive. So thank you very much.
No worries.
I've got about 30 models to paint for the weekend.
Ooh, yeah, priorities then. We need
I was going to say this is an hour out of your painting time.
That was the biggest self-sacrifice moving on to rats this year.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I can imagine.
It's all right.
There's definitely more models in one of your core units than some of the armies entirely, isn't there?
Definitely.
Yeah, I've got essentially 300 models going into Cardiff this weekend.
Nice. Well, I look forward to that as well because I'll see you there. Really, thanks very much, and we look forward to the remaining videos we've got. Depending on how you do, I might hit you up also for a bit of a review of ETC.
We'll see what I can do.
If anyone's got any questions for these guys, drop them into the comments as well, because we can always answer those in the comments. Or Tanker, Marcus, if either of you actually see the comments, feel free to reply directly. You're always welcome to do that. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, folks, because we want more updates from the ETC as it goes, and that's where you can find them as well as other places. So we're looking forward to hearing how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. But until then, do check out our other videos that are coming up in future weeks. But otherwise, we'll leave it there and say see you later.
Cheers all.
Gracias, por favor.